Thank you so much, Elliot. It really is a pleasure to have a chance to say a few words at CUNY's Greenlight Climate Festival. When you first invited me to join, I was immediately captivated by your passion and commitment to achieving climate action, but also immediately excited by the opportunity to engage with many young and prospective climate leaders of tomorrow. So you had originally asked me to give a little bit of background about my own professional journey. So as you know, and as you've just stated, I'm currently working on biodiversity, climate change, and health at WHO, which are all pretty hot topics at the moment, but weren't always so appealing to the broader public. I've been working in the area of science policy and sustainable development for about 20 years and have to admit, it wasn't always a clear, straightforward path. I originally began with a postgraduate background in public policy and international relations, working for a local NGO in renewable energy policy with a focus on the links between energy systems and climate change and regulatory economics, which fostered a growing awareness that there's a fundamental need to change the way we're doing business. And to catalyze that change, I believed it was necessary, at least for me, to keep cultivating my understanding of the interactions between policy, economics, and science, and how that all fits into the bigger picture. So I kept working while going back to grad school for master in science, which fundamentally changed my worldview. I took everything I already knew about policy and regulatory economics, coupled with the new scientific groundings I was gaining in ecology, biodiversity, environment, and health impact assessment, and combined those with a continued passion to change the world, and never really looked back since. I suddenly could only understand the world as one intricately complex system in which economy, society, business, politics, science, and culture interact synergistically and antagonistically to shape every single aspect of our daily lives, whether we know it or not. So, for the next decade, I continued to cultivate an understanding of how our management of biodiversity and nature both directly and indirectly influence health outcomes, and eventually came to manage the joint work program on biodiversity and health between the World Health Organization and the UN Convention on Biological Diversity until I joined WHO's Department for Environment, Climate Change, and Health. So when the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, against this backdrop, it was really surprising to me to see that millions of people were shocked by what was transpiring. Epidemiologists, public health experts, and other scientists have been warning us for decades now that our management, or rather our mismanagement of the natural world, was threatening health security. And through business as usual, it wasn't a question of if, but when the next pandemic was going to emerge. We had already had so many warnings with avian influenza, West Nile virus, Nipah virus, HIV/AIDS, Zika, malaria, Ebola, SARS, and so many others, that by the time COVID-19 was declared a health emergency of international concern, it was clear that when was now, and that this was yet another manifestation of how our destructive human practices were driving disease emergence, because so many of those underlying drivers cut across a vast range of human practices that are destructive to nature and wildlife, but also amplify disease risk and amplify climate change, whether these be large-scale deforestation for livestock and agricultural development, uncontrolled infrastructure development and urbanization, the way we produce, trade, and regulate both domesticated and wild species used as food and medicines, the overuse and misuse of pesticides, herbicides, antimicrobials in agriculture and livestock production, our collective addiction to fossil fuels. All of these increasingly destructive practices could only eventually and inevitably combine as a perfect storm to threaten our health, economies, and societies. So again, none of this should have really come as a surprise. There's a lot we still don't fully understand about the origins of COVID-19, but there's already so much that we do know about the drivers of disease emergence that is grounded in science and that we've completely failed as a society to act upon. So what is it that we do know, and what can we change? We know that human activity has transformed over 3/4 of our land-based environments and 2/3 of our marine environments. We know that we're losing species. Um, in fact, the very species that we need to survive at over 1,000 times the natural rate. That globally 3.2 billion people are affected by land degradation, that between 100 and 300 million people are at increased risk of floods and hurricanes because of the loss of coastal habitats and natural protection buffers. We know that our reliance on fossil fuels and transition to net zero is not optional, because air pollution alone kills over 7 million people every single year. We know that a transformation of our dysfunctional food systems is essential, and that unhealthy diets are responsible for over 11 million premature adult deaths every year. We also know that about 1 in every 4 premature deaths is attributable to preventable environmental factors, not only in future, but right now. And we also know that investing in prevention is infinitely less costly than pandemic response, not only in economic terms, but in terms of disability, livelihoods lost, lives lost. We also know that context and vulnerability matter, that those that are often least responsible for ecosystem degradation, for biodiversity loss, for climate change, the poor, the marginalized, and those that are least covered by social protection mechanisms also suffer the greatest consequences. But ultimately, we also know that COVID-19 doesn't have to be a story that begins and ends with doom and gloom. Really, it's an unprecedented teaching moment. Yes, of course, the global health, climate, and environmental challenges that we face concurrently are enormous. Yes, these challenges demand urgent and immediate attention and a long-term vision. But we also have now, I would say more than ever, the means to tackle these challenges in a much more innovative, interdisciplinary, and holistic way. We now have a truly, I would say, unprecedented opportunity to ensure a healthy, green, and just recovery from COVID-19. For any still wondering how that translates into purposeful action, I would invite you to take a look at the numerous entry points that we've identified at WHO and the WHO Manifesto for a Healthy and Green Recovery, which really does contain over 80 very concrete actionables. The bottom line is, each of us now has an unprecedented opportunity to break across our disciplinary silos, to engage with and learn from each other with a shared sense of purpose, a shared commitment and solidarity for change that together I really believe can be truly transformational. And, you know, everyone joining us here today, you all have an unprecedented opportunity right now to feel empowered and to engage, whether it be working with an NGO, with the public or the private sector, by supporting innovation and knowledge sharing, by giving your voice and time to a worthy cause through volunteer work, whether it be through advocacy, by starting a petition, joining or leading a cause you personally care about, and always fostering your curiosity to keep learning and to shaping that global narrative. You know, for me, it's always very inspiring to think about people like Greta, because ultimately, if a shy 16-year-old girl from Sweden with little more than knowledge, a poster, and determination can help catalyze a global movement for climate change, so can each and every one of you. So really, I do hope to join an even bigger Green Climate Festival next year, and look forward to hearing the many inspiring stories of how each of you are contributing to the shift toward ambitious and meaningful climate action. Thanks so much.